Okay, okay, here we go. All right, that is live streaming. Now I just have to record it. Okay, all right. Thanks everybody for being patient here while we get everything set up. My name is Kara Goodwin, and I'm the host of the Meditation Conversation podcast. We are streaming this webinar with Michael Massey. We're streaming it for the Conscious Awakening Network. So hello to those of you who have registered, who are joining via the Zoom, and also to those who are streaming this through the Conscious Awakening Network, either on the app, online through the Conscious Awakening Network, or through Amazon Fire, Roku, all the many ways that you're able to access this live through the Conscious Awakening Network. It is a joy to be with you here today. If you'd like to join us live in the future so that we can see you and interact with you and answer your questions, be sure you register. I do these every month, every third Tuesday for the Conscious Awakening Network, and you can register on my website at karagoodwin.com. Just go to the live stream events there. And so today, I'd like to welcome Michael Massey. Michael is a friend of the Meditation Conversation. He's been on, I think, roughly about 175 times.
Not that many. I think I'm the number one guest, though.
Yes, you do have the most recordings for sure, by a long shot. Michael has been featured in our Modern Mysticism with Michael segment. So if you go to themeditationconversation.com, you can search for Michael Massey or Modern Mysticism, and you'll see all of his contributions. But Michael is also my friend, my mentor. He's helped me quite a bit. He is a shaman. He's an engineer turned shaman. So he has a very strong engineering background. And so he has that perspective to energy. So that's really helpful for me as I have learned and experienced things energetically. He's really, that perspective has helped so much to have that kind of 3D engineering mind. And how does that fit in with more of the 5D and beyond experiences? So without further ado, welcome, Michael. So happy to be collaborating with you here again today.
Thank you, Kara. It's great to be back. Feels like it's been a millennium, and yes, it's really wonderful to be here on the show and to catch up with you as we head into this final quarter of 2023.
No kidding. And so I'll just mention I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana, in America, which is, depending on where you are in the world, if you know Chicago, it's kind of in the Chicago area-ish. It's like a 3-hour drive from Chicago, south. Yes, Patty, south. Michael has been in Indiana for about 3 years, almost 3 years, but he recently relocated to Washington, not Washington, D.C., but Washington State, which is on the West Coast. Yep, Pacific Northwest. Yeah, I can see Patty. He's trying to confirm on an imaginary map. But yes, Patty got up in the middle of the night. It's 2 a.m. in Australia where Patty is. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And Patty, thank you for getting up in the middle of the night to join us. It's always wonderful to have you here. So Michael right now is in Washington. And soon he will, I think in 3 weeks, he'll be going to Sedona. I'm on my way to Sedona tomorrow morning. I'll be spending the equinox in Sedona. But yes, we're in a very powerful window, the equinox window. So that's just an added bonus. That's kind of a coincidence. We didn't even plan for you, to be here doing this webinar specifically for the equinox, but that's just a happy synchronicity.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. And
but we will, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and it's shaping up to be a pretty potent and powerful portal or gateway. I don't know if anyone else is feeling that yet, but I certainly am. And so, good luck, Godspeed to everybody as we go through this next stage.
Yes, absolutely. And I concur. It is very, very powerful in many ways in my world as well. So we wanted to focus at least part of this webinar. Maybe it will turn into more of a specific, equinox energy discussion at some point. But I know that, Michael, the last time you and I talked, we were starting to touch on some things that feel like they want to be completed with a discussion on shadow work and the importance of embracing and integrating our shadows. And so that's what we wanted to make sure that we focused on today. And the reason for that is really based on some of your own personal experiences as this became a focus for you in your own development, your own spiritual progress. And it seemed like it was this really important key that opened other things up for you. And so we want to share that because it very well could be the same for other people, that it's kind of this thing that's not been getting attention because it's not really like a fun thing to focus on. But before we get too far into that, can you just share what you even mean by shadow work? And I want to clarify this because I had somebody email me yesterday and they were like, wait, are you advocating interaction with shadows? And I was like, oh, interesting that was the interpretation, because, it's like this light, dark. And so are you like suggesting that people go to the dark side or whatever? So and I can completely appreciate that. Like, wait, what? Why would you have this topic? So please, Michael, share some clarification on this.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm smiling a little bit because it is a pretty common misconception, and you come across it so frequently in literature about about reaching that point or that period of doing shadow work. And pardon me for a second, I need to put my phone on do not disturb. Oops. My apologies, everyone. Okay. And absolutely, and that certainly doesn't sound fun. And now, just to kind of segue right into it, a bit of the context overall, and we've returned to this now for several years about the overall building energetics of this increasing amplification of the energies here on the planet. This is part of the reason why it's really forcing this shadow work moment to come to the surface. So whether we like it or not right now, there's shadow work being done. And so what we want to do is just kind of bring some understanding to what this actually entails. And to your kind of initial question here, Kara, when we talk about the shadow, we're not talking about evil. And this is where I think people get hung up, is they're like, oh, integrate my evil side? What? How do I do that? And that sounds kind of dangerous. And what if I become that? Or what, and that's the, and that's, the limited understanding, obviously, or an incorrect understanding of what we mean by shadow. And to go back to shadow, and the real pioneer in this work was Carl Jung, who, what, 80 years ago or something like that, was his put together the most, the real pioneering work on the psyche and the shadow. And what we're talking about here in terms of the shadow is that which is we're unawares of or unconscious of. So if we were looking at kind of above the surface, we have that which we're conscious of, and then below the surface, we have that which are not conscious of. So when we're talking about shadow work, we're really talking about is the increasing awareness or the embracing of all those aspects of ourself that we have, that for one reason or another are suppressed into the subconscious. Now, it's important to understand that these may be positive or negative traits or aspects of ourself. So something can be hidden in the subconscious and it can be positive or negative. And in the case of, the negative, that's an aspect of self, of the monster, so to speak, of our personality that, lies dormant and then comes out. That's the rage monster, so to speak. And then, but we can have in the subconscious as well, we can have hidden talents and abilities and things about ourselves that we just simply didn't know that are amazing. And so the journey to actually do the shadow work is about kind of like lowering that level of the surface, is to unpack what has been in the subconscious in order to reveal. And when we do that, then we get both positive and negative comes out. But one thing, we do discover these hidden talents and these hidden gems. And then it also, this is the part that everybody's scared of, and that's the revealing of those more monstrous aspects of ourselves that are there. They're the things that get triggered and we lash out at. But as those come to the surface and we become aware of them, then there's the opportunity actually for them to integrate into the rest of the personality self, and no longer actually be as problematic. I'll pause there for a second.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for the clarification. I wonder too what you think about another type of kind of positive shadow that we might have, which is that kind of the unwillingness to step into ourselves, which would be like a gifts thing, but it might be even more subtle, where we're continuously like, we can't take a compliment, for example, where it's like, wow, you really articulated that well or something, and it's like, well, no, you just really understood it, and it's this constant deflection of receiving what we are displaying, and that others are kind of, highlighting, like, wow, that was really great. You did a great job. And how often do we go, no, you, and we like take that spotlight and turn it to somebody else. And it's this resistance to really own, I don't know. I see that a lot. And I have been like that a lot as well. I don't know if that fits in, but that's kind of another thing that came to mind.
Yeah, that's one of those things that typically falls under the camp of being of humility, but it can be a false humility, or it's a carryover. That happens to be one of those programs that puts in at some point as a check against the ego getting too self-absorbed.
Yeah.
So you're going to compliment my shirt. Oh, that's a nice, well, you say, hey, I love your shirt. And then I'm going to go, oh, well, your shirt's better.
Mm-hmm.
to deflect or reflect. And this is one way that, yeah, it might have been a program once upon a time that just was there so that the ego didn't get too full of itself. But then it can grow, or it can just become a block or an obstacle from actually sincerely being able to receive from others. And I know that I know there's many times I want to drop somebody a compliment. What I'm doing is doing an acknowledgement of something that is in that one of the quadrant, where this does relate. So we'd be talking about what you might call a hidden talent or a hidden gem. You're wanting to offer somebody a mirror reflection so that they can see that they're more gracious than they seem to be aware of. And it's amazing how much resistance can get them put up towards offering that reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And generally what happens is it's because that's an attribute that's in their subconscious that they do not yet want to bring into their awareness. So that would be something that's in their shadow.
Mm. Well, you talk about the quadrants. Can you build that out a little bit more for us?
So as an engineer, I love my 2x2 matrices. It takes me back to genetics and all that fun stuff. And now what you end up having, so if you have a positive and then if you look at positive traits and negative traits, then you would have, say, positive traits on one side, negative traits on this other side. And so we have two upper quadrants that are above the surface. So you have positive and negative. And then you have below, which is you're unawares of or in your shadow. Then you have a positive and negative. So we talked about those two. So this produces a 2x2 matrix. So we have the things that we are strengths that we are aware of. Okay, that would be in this upper quadrant here. Okay, our weaknesses, that would be in this quadrant over here. These are weaknesses that we're aware of, we might be working on. And then down in this quadrant, we have our hidden talents or abilities that we're unawares of. And then we have our negative dark side attributes over here that we're unaware of. So that produces our four quadrants. Now we were talking, the case that you mentioned, you could see is a quadrant, is this quadrant down over here, right? Mm-hmm. And then, yes, it's funny, in business analytics, when you're producing a business plan, there's something that's called a SWOT analysis, SWOT. And it's interesting, this is the way that you kind of evaluate a company or a market opportunity. You look at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And this ends up mapping our human personality psyche, because you have your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, which is your hidden talents, and then your threats. Those are the dark monsters and demons and skeletons and stuff that can get in the way.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And the whole purpose, really, care of us having this conversation is that we, as a people, the ego itself is like terrified of this kind of self-discovery type process, and this so doesn't need to be. And this can be as innocuous, this process of like self-examination and looking into the shadow, of this curiosity of self-discovery, of just like, hey, how do I look? It's not like a statement necessarily of who we are, but hey, if we get dressed for a big party or something like that, and you want to go to your partner and do a little twirl, how do I look? Do I have any toilet paper stuck in my zipper, or, and this is what we're really doing with this shadow work, is we're allowing ourselves just to be seen, to get feedback, so that we know, so that we can change or make an adjustment if necessary. And we can completely depersonalize this highly personal process.
That's beautiful. There's a lot of opportunity there, as you mentioned. So can we go to how have you used this in the last few months, and what has the result been?
Well, one of the things is I did make a bit of an announcement to my into my inner circle, if you will, and where I did an open invitation to say, hey, look, if there's anything that anyone has been biting their tongue about telling me, like, oh, I would really like to share but I don't know how he'll take it, or something like that, I'm like, please, I gave everybody a free pass. And so that's one of an actual practical thing that I did with in my interactions, is I just opened the door and I said, hey, look, if you spot anything that is a blind spot to me, then please let me know. So it began with me in terms of a willingness to undergo this process. And I feel like at least personally, I'd crossed a certain threshold where the prospect of just becoming aware of myself wholly and completely is so exciting that that supersedes any fear or trepidation I might have in terms of what may surface. And so that's at least the point threshold that I've crossed over in my own journey. And not everybody may be there yet, and that's okay. But we can always start with at least with a trusted relationship. You find somebody, and then literally ask them to specifically be that mirror to reflect, to enable you to see yourself better. And if you approach it that way, we approach it this way with each other, then it becomes a much safer process, and we don't feel so much like we're being judged.
Yeah. So how did that go for you?
It's been incredible. Okay. And this offers kind of a bit of a segue into a very tangible benefit. And what has really kind of transpired is that the more I've been willing to look at these various different things, and this includes what happens is that the places we don't want to look are the ones that are places that are painful. I mean, and that's generally how stuff tends to get buried within the subconscious, is because there's pain associated with it. And now, using the 3 keys that we've talked about in other things of, forgiveness, patience, and gratitude, and I return to those all the time in order to stabilize my own energy system and recenter myself. But in this case, forgiveness is going to be the biggie here when you're doing shadow work. Now we can certainly, when we pop out something unknown that's positive that comes into our awareness, that's awesome. But when there's something that's negative that comes into our awareness, oh, I've been doing that the whole time. This is a wonderful little moment, like where we have some kind of thing that we've been doing. We haven't been aware of it. All of a sudden we become aware of it. Now, what is our response to that? It's very important that we have forgiveness at the ready, because otherwise you're like, oh my goodness, I've been hurting the one that I love all these years and I didn't know I was doing that. And this is the importance of being able to forgiveness for ourselves, for others, and to have that on the ready. So I use that a lot. And what's happened is that as you progress through this process of becoming, not only do you become more aware of your own internal processes and your own psychological makeup in doing this work, but what happens is it's like it's depleting the ammunition stores of the proverbial demon on the shoulder. We're always this angel and devil, and as such, then I found that the weight of the critic, this is the aspect of the personality, this is always critical of ourselves and others. And I've noticed so significantly that the critic does not have nearly the same amount of power that it used to.
Wow.
And I think this is one of the most significant. Now it's like, hey, anybody out there, raise your hand if you ever make a mistake and then beat yourself up over it. Does anybody do that? Yeah. And the question would be is like, when you're beating yourself up, like what are you beating yourself up with? Is it like a hammer, a mace? Is it a flail with broken glass? I know for me, if I go back like 20 years, before I started all this work, when I would make a mistake or something like that, I remember it was like just like knives stabbing myself in the head, of like really not being very forgiving with myself at all. And it's just incredibly, it was painful. And there are certain memories and certain things that if I just even go back to them, you just like cringe and you feel that pain. And I felt that all dissipate. In fact, I can reflect now on my whole life. I've actively been seeking out painful memories that I remember being painful, to remember them now without that judgment upon myself. It is really incredible.
Wow. So what can you connect those things a little bit more in terms of how this forgiveness of self relates to the lowering of what you're unaware, where it's like, okay, here's the line between what I'm aware of, what I'm not aware of. Now that line is lowering so that which I used to be unaware of is now what I am aware of. What's the link there in your opinion about that, and then forgiveness of self?
Well, in general, let's say the less aware someone is, then the more fear they have in their equation, okay, that produces a larger shadow. And it's the fear quotient, if you will, that produces such a strong negative response. And there is such a tendency to avoid. And what happens is that people don't like to go into the darkest quadrant. That's all the negative side that's unawares of. And so that's the scariest place for people to go. And so if you look at like the volume of that, if the less aware that somebody is, that volume in that quadrant is bigger. Mm-hmm. And then that represents kind of like the weight of the club of judgment that one hits oneself and others with.
Okay.
And so as we lower the waters to become more and more aware, what happens is that volume of that sector shrinks as such that it becomes less weighty.
Okay, that makes sense.
So you still have the self-check processes. I still, like, if I do make a mistake or something, I'm like, I still hit, but it's like I'm hitting myself with a wiffle ball bat or something. It's just, it isn't carry the same kind of pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I love that. So one other thing that comes up is there a watch out with this practice in terms of there can be the tendency that we maybe overemphasize the shadow or overemphasize working through trauma, or, maybe like keep surfacing more things that we need to clear. I don't know. Is there a watch out there where it's like you can maybe overemphasize this?
Yeah, well, this is the important thing is, okay, so we're like human, so we tend to human things, right? In which case, we tend to adopt certain practices and carry them on sometimes far longer than they're necessary. And you've heard this all before. I'm going to use it probably in this context, which might be new, which is let joy be your guide. And one of the things that kind of important, and this is coming forth in some material that I'm putting together that'll be forthcoming. But everybody has what's called like a general purpose, and then we have special purpose. Now, most people are like, hey, what's my purpose here? They're really wondering what their special purpose is, but there's a general purpose for everybody that shares. Okay. And it's simply you're here to expand your consciousness, embody that consciousness, and enjoy it.
Of course, you have 3 E's. That's very Michael.
Of course, it's very Michael. And so the important part is that third step. So if it's not leading to a more joyful experience of life, then you're stuck somewhere. And so a lot of people actually get stuck in this whole business of, I need to clearing. And what happens is that's a script that they'd actually be running. So every day it's like, that's what they're looking for. So just remember, it's important to stop to smell the roses. Understanding that any of this clearing work you're doing is in order for you to actually be able to look out upon the world that you see and be aware of more of it. So make sure you're taking time to do that. That's where you want to be. So sure, do 5 or 10 minutes of clearing work in your meditation if you want to, and then go live your day. But your day is not about clearing. It's about living.
Yeah, I love that. I think of it too, and of clearing, like dissolving the lower, lower vibrations, lower thoughts. It's an important thing for us to do. But then it's like getting that out so that more of the high stuff can come in, even from like a meditation perspective, if that's part of your practice, where it's like energetically, even just imagining, even just using the imagination to think like, okay, I'm kind of clearing out this heavier stuff and letting that just dissolve or let it go into the earth. And now letting more kind of beam into me that's higher and brighter, and doing that filling up so that it's like, not only are we taking care of that lower stuff, but then we're lifting, as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Refill your cup with the good stuff. Yeah, for sure. Yep. And that's what in a sense, I've witnessed many times with those very focused on that clearing of pain and suffering, as that's their processing system is like, all they're doing is focusing on, and their intake is basically pain and suffering. And so they're just stuck in a loop, like they're in a waste processing system.
Yeah.
They're just constantly intaking waste. And of course, that's why they have so much to process. So just remember, what we're after here is the beauty. And it's so important to take that time to look around and see the beauty in the world around us.
Yeah.
Because that's the reflection of the light that is within us.
I love it. Thank you. And to those of you who are here on Zoom, if you do have any questions, feel free you can raise your hand, you can type it in the chat, anything around the shadow, or any other questions that you might have for Michael, please feel free to ask. Michael, is there anything else on this topic of shadows that you want to be sure to share today?
Yeah, I can go over. There's a certain point, and for those that are more adept in being able to steer your consciousness, then here's something to kind of play with. All right. So at any given moment of time, most of the time, as humans, we're operating in some form of displacement from our true center of our soul self. Okay. And that's just the case. Now, let's say how far away we are in orbit or proximity in a particular orbital trajectory, and that's all happens to be different. Now, what happens is that if you take two objects and you go, okay, if the center of our soul self is the light source, and then we're displaced from it, it's that displacement that the light is then casting upon this personality construct, that's what produces a shadow on the other side. So I want everybody to understand this, that if you actually move those two together and you basically bring the personality self and it actually merges totally into the soul self, then the light is actually shining out everywhere and there is no shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we ultimately are on. It's our destiny, or we're on track to, is to ultimately to reaching that point. And you can play around with this in your own meditations and what's I gonna say? In your own meditation, basically, of playing around with these points of consciousness, and notice how when you bring it, there should be this point where you click into center, and you'll just kind of see that the shadow just disappears.
And this is what's interesting. So mechanically with this, there are so many layers to how that is done. because you mentioned meditation, but I even notice this, like if I'm driving in my car, so when you talk about point of consciousness, this is simply, where is your awareness at that given point? So and it requires present moment awareness. You cannot merge with your source if you are even a tiny bit in the past or a tiny bit in the future. So that's one mechanistic way to find yourself there. Absolute presence, absolute this present moment right now. And so sometimes I'll play with this in the car where I'm like, I can just feel that. But there's also this, you talk about point of consciousness, and I would another way to think about this is, where is my awareness? And I think meditation is especially helpful for being aware of where your awareness is, being able to notice, like, oh, my awareness is more here, but like there's a physical location where your awareness is that you can tune into. And so it's like, if you can get into the spine, that's your center. That's where the present moment is. Like when you're in the present moment, you're in your spine naturally. And when you're in your spine, you merge with the present moment. So that's just my experiential interpretation to kind of get a little bit into the mechanics of how to find your point of consciousness and apply that, because there are a lot of different parts to it, and it doesn't have to be complicated. So you can just play with like, oh, I'm completely present, or let me be completely in the present moment, and then just kind of notice. So where is my awareness now?
Yep.
Oh, it's completely in my center.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely. And as this happens, then what you can also do then is notice if there's any distracting thoughts that are coming up at you, then you might know that's the work that you need to do, because that's the force or the energies that are trying to pull you away from this present moment.
Yeah.
And then in that, you can just play there's a question there on how do you kind of lower those waters. And one of those things is really just to shed fears, and that will do it. Okay. And then even just a willingness to embrace fear will begin to do it. So the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, right? But literally there's nothing to fear. And we remember that truth, that's important. And fears go away as you're able to name them. So you can just practice name that fear. So if you feel that heightened state of anxiety or whatnot, you're feeling a displacement, and you don't feel anchored into the body, you don't feel safe, and you don't feel secure. What are you afraid of? And just name it.
I love that. Yeah. And that's a helpful thing too, because often it is hidden. Like we think it's something else, but if we keep peeling it, it's like, oh, actually that's jealousy, but I don't want to be jealous. So I'm going to project something onto somebody else or.
Exactly. And this is how we can just catch, and we don't need to feel bad for being jealous, and it's one of those things. And if we stop trying to pretend that we're some kind of perfect person who's never been mad or angry or any of these things that we know we don't want to be, but we have to acknowledge that we are that also. And just because we get angry, just because we feel ashamed, just because we have certain things, that ultimately doesn't define us.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
We do have some questions that have come in.
Okay.
So Jane asks, how does the line of awareness lower? Does it happen naturally, or do you need to intentionally lower the line to peer into what it is we're unaware of?
Yeah, that's where I saw that question, Jane. That's why I was responding with the whole, the name that fear kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Or you can take a shamanic journey into the jungles of Peru. You can do that too.
Awesome. Okay. Kel says, my issue is that it never seems to clear. I've been working through literally a half a century of pain, illness, trauma, and abuse for the past 9 months, and I'm struggling to find anything good.
Oh, that's a toughie. Yeah, Kel, well, this time, there's certain points where you may just require help from the right person in order to do that. And one of the things that's really important, and it goes back to kind of something that Kara had mentioned at the beginning in terms of the receptivity. And one of the things that typically tends to happen with somebody who's been through trauma, and particularly severe trauma, is they carry that wound around as there's a badge associated with it, because its severity and this knowing that people may not be able to relate to it, is that we tend to wall it off, and then and it gets expressed in certain ways of, oh no, you just don't understand, or this kind of thing, where we're protective of our pain. And it is so important that we're actually able to open up, and in this process of opening up, and we allow others in. And I know this can be really, really tough to do, but it's imperative if we want to heal. And when we let others in, then we're no longer alone, and everything can change. And my heart goes out to you there, Kel, and I hope that you're able to you have or find somebody that's able to process a lot of that with you.
And then, Kel, if you want to talk to Michael about this more in person, you should have my email. And I'd be happy to connect you. Anybody here, I'd be happy to connect you with Michael if you want to go deeper into your own work, get some support there. I highly personally have worked with Michael for a number of years, and I mean, just the value I've gotten is off the charts. So highly recommend, if you don't already have a resource of somebody who can help you, please reach out. Okay, Michelle. Hello, Michelle. She says, center of spine or center is the spine. Okay, this is great. When I was talking about bringing your awareness into your spine, it's really both. And really, I would say specifically, it's the heart center. So if you're very proficient in moving your consciousness, it's, if you want to get really direct, it would be that center of the heart. But for me, if I just have been noticing that, I bring my awareness into the present, and I just naturally feel all my awareness. It's almost like it's out here diffused in my energy field. And if I come into the present, it goes, but for me, it's like into the spine, just in a general way. So it's both. It would, you can think of it as like really concentrated in the heart. And the heart, if we think of our human being, here's some of Michael's teachings that I've received over time. But if you think of the human vessel and the chakra system, the 7 major chakras that run in the body, you've got the heart center. That's the middle ground between the 3 lower chakras, which are your more earth-bound, earth planetary human And then you get to the heart, and then you've got the 3 above that are etheric, that are more of your non-earth connection there. So that, the heart is a very important role, but I would just say, like, just notice within yourself when you get into the present moment, is your awareness just comes back to the center, which is like that column, the central column in the spine. I hope that makes sense. Do you have anything to add to that, Michael?
No, I just say I come back to the elevator, and then you can choose which floor you want to get off at.
Totally. I love it. Okay, awesome. Maria, to get to the good stuff in the subconscious, to uncover that and integrate it, I would assume we need to embrace the not so pleasant shadow parts of ourselves at the same time, or however they arise and release. Is that correct?
Yeah, can you read that one more time?
Yeah, she says to get to the good stuff in the subconsciousness, to uncover that and integrate it, I would assume we would need to embrace the not so pleasant shadow parts of ourselves and at the same time, or however they arise and release.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That was the point, is that once you engage in this, you have to be willing to do both. And it's just the way it is. And if you just try to just unpack the parts of your consciousness or your shadow that have just the hidden talents, oh, wouldn't that be neat? I just want to unpack everything except for that, all the ugly stuff. Yeah. So it's a mixed bag. And if you really can, and I'm a testimony to this, is almost fall in love with the process of the uncover. And if you're actually engaged really with the process, then even the surfacing of something negative is still a win. Because when you really want it, it's like, oh, do I want that attribute or that behavior? Do I want it? It's still going to be there no matter what. Do I want it just wreaking havoc without my awareness, or do I want it to be in my awareness so that I can maybe do something about it or temper it or even dissolve it?
Exactly. How are we going to progress if we're not willing to even see what it is that's holding us back? And it very much parallels kind of the times that we're in right now. Because there is so much change happening, and we are all awakening to different things that are happening in the external that makes us see things in a new way. And it's hard to see, right? It's hard to see some of the things that we're seeing and experiencing across humanity. But these are things that have been hidden for so long. And so it is one of those, like, as they rise to the surface, it's painful, but then it is ultimately better because it's, happening under the surface and we don't see it. And then there's nothing, it can't change if it's not surfaced.
Very much the same. Yes. I think we have a comment there. This is the whole learning how to love all of oneself, warts and all kind of thing. Yes. And when somebody, and it has the natural byproduct of just of when you meet somebody who's just entirely comfortable in their own skin, no matter what, such people are a delight to be around. And that's the whole point of this, is that when we are called to be a light unto this world, for that's who we truly are. We are light unto this world. And by doing this so-called shadow work, we're just peeling back those layers, that the bushels that cover us, the things that block our light from entering this world where it is so sorely needed.
And it blocks our opportunities as well, because we have these different, if you want to think of it as like different versions of ourselves happening at any given point. And if we want to expand into the highest version of ourselves, it does require the owning and the resolution of these things. So, I've seen and I know Michael knows this, but I've had, kind of a mystical experience where I could see this opportunity that was, I had a block. I had like a block in the 3D world, something I had to overcome. I had to figure it out. It was like a problem I had to solve. And in a mystical state, I saw it. I saw all the players. I saw the solution. And I saw that my big, like the solution required me to ask for help from a specific person. And my big block was pride. Like I didn't, even though I could see how the highest solution for everybody, what for that person too, if I ask this person to help me, it helps them on a soul level. And I still, armed with that spiritual knowledge, was terrified because of my pride, because this is a shadow in this life that's very hard for me. And it was so hard. But I knew that to get to that highest solution, I had to overcome that. I had to just go, okay, that's my shadow. It's hard, but to reach this solution, that's the best solution for everybody, I have to face that shadow, and I have to be courageous, and I have to do my part. I have to do the part that I came here for everybody. And it required me to see. I didn't want to see that I was prideful. Like, I don't want to see myself that way. But, it was so clear. It was so clear. And I was like, and then it was just really funny too, afterwards, to be like, I can see this so clearly and I still don't want to do it. So.
That's beautiful. And that's fantastic. And that's exactly the way that this work can be. It can actually be fun in this kind of a way. You're like, oh, and really, when we come down to it, and it's all about this human experience. And the more that we can be not so serious about it, and realize that we all have to do this work, and so we might as well have fun doing it.
Yes, thank you. And Patty says, is not pride an ego issue? Get over it. You're still a beautiful person. Well, thank you, Patty. Thank you. And yes, it's very much tied to ego. Absolutely. So, but that's the work, right? To keep detaching bit by bit, opportunity by opportunity, to loosen that hold. It all goes together. So,
yeah.
Well, what a beautiful time with all of you today. Thank you. That flew by somehow. It's been an hour. Patty probably wants to go to bed. I can't blame you. He's not worried. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Again, if anybody does want to be in touch with Michael, please contact me. I'm happy to connect you. Thank you so much, and happy equinox, everybody.